When the history books are written, they will say that George H.W. Bush was a great president of the United States, a diplomat of unmatched skill, a commander-in-chief of formidable accomplishment, and a gentleman who executed the duties of his office with dignity and honor.
Dignity and honor, a lasting legacy for the nation's 41st president. George Herbert Walker Bush back in Texas tonight for a final farewell. This morning, hundreds gathered in Washington, D.C. for a state funeral at the National Cathedral, a ceremony replete with moments of grace and humor, much like the man it honored, celebrating a life lived in service to our nation. His son, former President George W. Bush, giving the final eulogy.
George W. Bush had a very tough job. He had to be presidential and the son, and that's not easy.
In his inaugural address, the 41st President of the United States said this: "We cannot hope only to leave our children a bigger car, a bigger bank account.
We must hope to give them a sense of what it means to be a loyal friend,
a loving parent, a citizen who leaves his home, his neighborhood, and town better than he found it."
George W. Bush was the first former president ever to eulogize a former president who was his father in this fashion, and he rose to the occasion. A president who's never been known for soaring oratory, hit a lot of very important points that I think spoke to George H.W. Bush as a president and maybe more importantly as a person.
In the front row, all of the living presidents and first ladies brought together in a moment of unity, perhaps President Bush's final act of service to this country.
This was a rare meeting of the President's Club, the first time that all of the living presidents were in one place since the inauguration of President Trump himself. And in some ways, it was a familiar setting. A state funeral is the appropriate place for these presidents to gather together. But in other ways, it was about as uncomfortable a setting as possible because it was all happening in Donald Trump's Washington.
Throughout the ceremony today, pockets of lightness.
To us, he was close to perfect, but not totally perfect. His short game was lousy. He wasn't exactly Fred Astaire on the dance floor.
On the primary campaign trail in New Hampshire once, he grabbed the hand of a department store mannequin asking for votes. When he realized his mistake, he said, "Never know, gotta ask."
A window into some of the more human and private moments of this lifelong public servant.
In his 90s, he took great delight when his closest pal, James A. Baker, smuggled a bottle of Grey Goose vodka into his hospital room. Apparently it paired well with the steak Baker had delivered from Morton's.
And in the crowd, this not-so-subtle exchange between the 43rd president and the former First Lady Michelle Obama.
At John McCain's funeral, George W. Bush was sitting near Michelle Obama and passed her a mint. And that became, something that the Twitterverse glommed onto. So today, the minute he saw her, gave her a mint.
Also on display, moments of sorrow and heartache.
Your decency, sincerity, and kind soul will stay with us forever. So through our tears, let us know the blessings of knowing and loving you, a great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have.
It's always a hope at a time like this when we can think about what it means to be a true public servant, what it means to put country high on your list. It's always a hope that people will think about that and go on to be better citizens.
On Monday, President Bush, America's longest living president, was flown from Houston to Washington, D.C. on Air Force One via Special Air Mission 41, a tribute to his service as a Navy fighter pilot. His trusty service dog, Sully, followed him along on his journey, waiting for the president on the tarmac. Thousands paying their respects in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, including the current president and First Lady. And this moment, the former Senator Bob Dole lifted out of his wheelchair for a final salute.
The choreography of that final journey to Washington, D.C., and then back home to Texas, I think it's in fitting with the way that George H.W. Bush understood himself. He was a Yankee through and through, a New Englander, but it was his adopted home state of Texas that came to define him.
George H.W. Bush was born June 12, 1924, in Milton, Massachusetts. He was the son of a banker who later became a politician. He was 17 when he met the love of his life, Barbara Pierce, at a Christmas dance. It would become a love story 73 years strong, the longest marriage in presidential history.
Is he still the handsomest man you'd ever seen?
My eyesight's getting bad.
God, golly.
On his 18th birthday, the young George Bush enlisted in World War II, becoming the youngest pilot in the U.S. Navy. 2 years in, he was shot down over the Pacific.
I knew if I wasn't rescued, I would be captured, and it was a harrowing experience.
He was rescued and made it home to Barbara. He went on to Yale, where he was captain and first baseman of the baseball team. He and Barbara had 6 children, George, Jeb, Marvin, and Neil, and 2 daughters, Dorothy and Robin, who died of leukemia at the age of 3.
He was very close.
I was very close to her.
She adored him.
What was it that pulled you back up on your feet afterwards?
He was very strong then. He was wonderful.
They had moved the family to Texas, where he ran a successful oil business before he entered politics.
George Bush, the happy family man, is now George Bush, Republican candidate for the United States Senate.
In 1980, he ran for president for the first time.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, George Bush.
Ronald Reagan went on to win the nomination and the presidency. Bush served 8 years as his vice president, and then he ran for president again and won as a moderate.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, it was President George H.W. Bush who pulled together a coalition of allies to launch Operation Desert Storm.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met.
But with the economy at home faltering, a promise he had made 4 years earlier came back to haunt him in the 1992 presidential race.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
He lost that bid to Bill Clinton.
I just had a great feeling of letting down a lot of people that worked for me. You have this ghastly feeling you let them down, and then you get over it, and you go on with your life.
Before leaving office, he penned a letter for his successor, who sat down with ABC News and read a portion of it.
I wish you great happiness here. There will be tough times made even more difficult by criticism you may not think is fair. I'm not a very good one to give advice, but just don't let the critics discourage you or push you off course. You will be our president when you read this note. I wish you well. I wish your family well. Your success is our country's success. I thought it was vintage George Bush. I thought he was trying to be a citizen in the highest sense of the word. It was profoundly moving to me personally.
Bush later forged a bond with the man who beat him. Together, he and Clinton raised money for the victims of the Indian Ocean tsunami and back here at home, Hurricane Katrina.
I think it sent a good sign across the country that you don't have, because you run against somebody, it doesn't make you an enemy.
Earlier this year, Barbara Bush passed away, her husband by her side.
After Mom died, Dad was strong, but all he really wanted to do was hold Mom's hand again.
President Bush spent his last summer in Kennebunkport, Maine, surrounded by family. In October, attending the wedding of his granddaughter, Barbara Bush.
Family means everything to me. I don't know where I'd be in life if I wasn't blessed with a lot of kids and grandkids and family.
With 5 surviving children, 17 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren, perhaps the greatest legacy of this American president is family.
Last Friday, when I was told he had minutes to live, I called him. The guy answered the phone, said I think he can hear you, but he hadn't said anything for most of the day. I said, Dad, I love you, and you've been a wonderful father. And the last words he would ever say on earth were, I love you too.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.